Alright, ladies and gentlemen, Baron here. So today is day 3 of our preview of the American armor coming out in War Thunder for tanks in patch 1.45. Today we have the M4A1 Sherman tank armed with the 76mm longer barrel as opposed to the traditional gun that most Sherman started with at the beginning of the war, the 75mm short barrel lower velocity gun. So the 76mm gun obviously added a lot more penetration. This is things that we all know for the most part. But what's kind of interesting, if you weren't aware, is that if you're going to be playing War Thunder tanks or any World War II tank game, be prepared for a lot of Sherman tanks. That's because it was heavily produced, similar to how the Soviets had the T-34 that was relatively prevalent, and there was a lot of different variants throughout the war. There's going to be an increase in variants for the Sherman. Over 49,000 of these tanks were produced during World War II, and not all of them were the same. There's a lot of different modifications and variants that, and I'm going to cover some of the ones that I think would be pretty cool. First, you can see a picture of the Sherman M4 with a 105mm howitzer. I think if you kind of want, in other tank games, it's called a derp gun. A pretty powerful, big howitzer gun. Lower velocity, firing high explosive rounds. It's going to be kind of interesting to see how it works because there are a couple derp guns over on the Soviet side with the KV-2 and some of the SUs and ISUs. So it should be kind of fun, I think, to play and be a nice change of pace from the traditional, Sherman tanks that have 75 to 76mm guns. The second one is probably my favorite, and that's the Sherman Firefly. It's got a 3-inch gun or a 76.2mm gun, and the Brits were the primarily operators of this gun. They basically took the Sherman and were like, this gun is completely inadequate. We're gonna have to do something if we're gonna fight the Jerrys. So they put on their lovely 3-inch gun, which was 76.2mm gun. Pretty good penetration, and they even actually had an interesting way of camouflaging their barrel so as to trick the German tankers. That's just another Sherman with a 75. We can sit here and let it bounce and let's look for the more dangerous tanks. So they would camouflage their gun barrel, and they would specifically target Fireflies because of how deadly they could be against German armor. The third is the Sherman Jumbo, and this thing has just tons of armor on the front. It's going to be very beefy, and it's going to definitely increase the survivability of Sherman tanks, which didn't have a very good reputation for survivability. And, there were some other issues like Shermans being nicknamed Tommy Cookers by the Germans and things like that. But it has a ton of armor. And now we have the Sherman Easy 8. And this thing also has a 76mm gun. It's not like the M4A1 76. There are slight variations on it. But if you think about it, there's going to be a lot of Shermans and a lot of different ways you can upgrade them. Obviously you have up to the 105mm, high explosive gun. You've got basically upgrades to suspension, to the tracks, to the commander's cupola, adding applique armor. It's just like there's just so many different ways that they upgrade this tank during the war, and we'll probably see that. What's also interesting is that the M4 tank chassis was used for a lot of other vehicles as well. As you can see here, the M36 Jackson, which was armed with the 90mm gun, and then the M10 Wolverine, which was armed with the 3-inch gun, 76.2mm gun, and that was, similar to the Sherman Firefly. And then finally we have the Sherman Calliope. These are some crazy, I don't know if we'll ever see them in the game, but wouldn't it be great if we did? The Sherman Calliope had rockets on the top, similar to a Katyusha rocket launcher. And finally, to close this out, we have the Sherman Crocodile, armed with a flamethrower. I would love to see this in game. Now, I want to get your opinions on it. Would you like to see the Sherman Crocodile? It's got a flamethrower. It would open up flame tanks to the game. Certain nations did experiment and use these during the war. But I think it would be fun because imagine you're on the far side of the map. All of a sudden you see just fire, just rip through some forest. You see a tank explode, turret pops off. It'd be a pretty short range weapon. And once it was used, you would know where the tank using a flamethrower was, so you'd probably be pretty worried and would target it, but I still think it would be a fun weapon system to have in the game. I also think it would be something different that other tank games would not have, and therefore it is more marketable. Make it a premium. I don't know. But I am a proponent of adding the Sherman Crocodile and flamethrower based tank weapons into the game. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Baron. I thank y'all for watching. Make sure to pull the trigger on that like button, and I will see you soon. Also, if you haven't seen the videos on the M2 medium tanks and the M16 half tracks, which I cover those vehicles as well as some other vehicles that may be in the game for the US Armor Guide, make sure to check out the video description below where I have them both linked, and you can click these links right here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again.